Chair, thank you very much. I do have a few colleagues that are here, but I will attempt to represent them. They've gone through the report. We have had some discussions as well. There's a number of areas, when I will call him DG Mula, I'm not going to call him Prof. When he was speaking, I thought there's quite a lot of parallels because some of the issues that we picked up, and I'm just going to flag something and then use an example, then go to the next. But to just give structure to our brief response, firstly, there's a bit of a disjuncture between what are the lessons, hence the recommendations. So you find in the recommendations things that are extremely random, have no relationship with the report whatsoever. And an example of that would be, where has this issue about building a cruise terminal, where did that come from? What relationship has it got to do with what we are doing at this point in time? And that worries me, I must say. If you go also into the details of the report, you would find examples of things such as stated statements like there was no support provided to the restaurant industry, which I don't have any knowledge of what the basis of such a statement would be. But had there been interviews, for instance, with the department to establish what exactly was done with this particular sector, starting obviously with the fact that if you go into the measures that we agree were not sufficient in terms of the fiscal support that was given. That included every business in the sector, but it needed to be at a particular threshold. So it would not be correct then to say that restaurants were supposed to be in a category of their own. B&Bs were experiencing the same pressures that restaurants were experiencing. Attractions were experiencing the same pressures that restaurants were experiencing. So that statement would not necessarily be factual. But the assumption would be that perhaps the strategy was actually to provide financial support in that particular way. And that was not the strategy at all. The strategy was to get operations back as soon as it possible. As soon as it was possible to do so. And why am I going there is because all the efforts that we then put were meant to get that early reopening. You would recall we pushed to get to opening of takeaways. We pushed for sit down in restaurants. We pushed for visitation in within provinces, attractions and so on, including game drives and so on. We pushed for cross-boundary movement to be allowed, and that was after we had already pushed for opening of the various of the accommodation establishments and so on. And way before that, concerted effort to ensure that there was some sort of an opportunity that could be taken advantage of, which was to bring establishments to assist with the whole process of quarantining and so on. So that context, I think, is very important in terms of what exactly was the strategy. The strategy was not to throw money at the problem because we did not have it. But the strategy was to make sure that we get back into demonstrating that we are able to operate safely and get back to business much quicker. And that is what the entire sector had agreed upon. Night in, night out, and we were literally spending all those evenings going through all these details. And that's why if you go into those details, you would find that the sector became the very first one to have the protocols in place and translating those protocols into directions and making sure that this is how things are actually going to work out and so on fully negotiated with the full support of the industry behind it. Now, I shared that brief story for a purpose, because I would want to get to a point where, how are these lessons structured? Because what I would want to see is the kind of information that comes through as these are the lessons that we have actually obtained out of this particular process, should assist us in not doing the same things that may not necessarily work, or affirming things that actually worked, and based on fact, and with evidence. So that is crucial. That is extremely crucial, because if we lose that, I hear the aspect of geographic distribution. These and issues of gender parity, issues of transformation. I'm not seeing them here. And you would know that one of the things that we've learned is that you will always find it very difficult to implement a transformational program when there could be others that may not necessarily agree with it, even if it is the law of the land. We were taken to court because we wanted to ensure that the BEE aspect to the issuing of grants and so on, which is the law, it's not an option, it's the law, is implemented. But we were taken to court for that. And as we speak, we went to the High Court. The matter went even as far as the Congo Court, came back, now it's going to the Appeal Court and so on. So that tells you something about the sector itself. And it tells you that there is an environment which does require certain particular type of engagement and so on to ensue, so that we are able to actually come out with an inclusive sector. And this is what has been called for, even at a global level. So if you do go to the literature of the UNWTO, it will actually give you the same things. The figures and all that I see, but that's where I think we have all of that. That's what I want to try and say. We have all of those, but what we would benefit from is someone who's looking at these things, the lessons that are coming from there. What are the lessons from transformation that we can learn from all these things that have actually happened? What are the lessons from being able to work in a structured manner consistently? The reason why we were able to have all the things that I was telling you is because we have got somewhat permanent structural arrangement that we use to be able to interface with the sector. And it is consistent. It is consistent. One of the things that we don't always go out there and say, this is the only sector that was able to have a direct meeting with the president. We facilitated that so that we could actually bring to the president the appreciation of our readiness. And those things we did. Other sectors that could have opted for others, they decided they would rather work with this portfolio. The casinos, our closest link to the casinos is because our BE charter covers them. But beyond that, they are regulated by DTIC. But they opted to work with us, and we worked together to develop the protocols. And everybody was in a shock that we were actually successful in getting the casinos to be opened in such a short space of time. No one had such expectation. But what led to that? It was because of the essence of a collaborative approach between private and public sector. That's really, there was nothing else. It was really exactly that. And working on the basis of evidence as well as application of knowledge properly. Those were the things that actually assisted the sector to come out. A big gap that I also see is that there is assumptions that had it not been for the lockdown, there would have actually been a flood of people traveling across the country in the midst of COVID. Is that fact? And I think those are the kinds of things I would expect that Prof. Rogerson and his a fellow that they're working together on this, should be able to look at that to say, but what was the psyche of the market during that particular period? And anecdotally, all of us here could actually have our own positions. But I can tell you, when we were in the middle of a wave, I wouldn't take a chance, personally, because I had so much unknowns about the disease, and all we're seeing across the globe is what is actually going on. So there has got to be that particular balance to say, and if it is a fact that people were going to actually travel, so be it, that's okay. And I'm saying this because as we speak, South African borders are not closed. South African borders are not closed. I've just read the statistics for March, and they just came out, and we are sitting at about 157 or so thousand people from the entire globe in terms of the numbers that we actually received. And in some regions, for instance, I mean, if you look at Europe, you're moving from 73 last year around that time, and then now you're down to far less than 30, somewhere there. And the reason why I'm putting this context, I'm trying to show that this gap, if it is left unaddressed, what we will not know is what must we do if tomorrow we've got another highly infectious communicable disease that is not necessarily coming from, I mean, that comes up from a pandemic point of view. What then should we do? What then should we do to be able to sustain? I'm not getting those. So it is important that we go to that level. And like I'm saying, the figures and so on that we have, but really what makes things work, what makes things not work. There's nothing that's going to change the, what do you call this thing? That's going to change the environment when it comes to the fiscal environment immediately. So if we were to be hit by something tomorrow, the answer is not going to come from the fiscals. But then what is it that out of what has been done has demonstrated that there could be some things that, if done and done properly, will be able to get us to somewhere. Part of what we have done is actually to give attention to the supply base. I see you talking about monies that have been transferred to sort out sandpacks and so on. Yes, I understand that, but basically, more than anything else, that money was solely because the revenue from the tourists was not there, but that revenue is actually the main funding source to maintain that particular estate. Now, we have entered into a bigger partnership with sandpacks to ensure that that whole product does not actually go to the dogs, so to say. And to be able to do that, we are then making sure that there is proper maintenance during this particular tough period so that we retain this particular estate. And by the time that the market actually starts to pick up, we are back, but we have got the product ready. And we're doing that with the provinces, we're doing that with some of these iconic sites and so on, to make sure that this is actually well maintained and then it doesn't necessarily go down. So those are the issues. I hear that there is lack of information on the tourist guides. I don't know who has asked for this information, but this is a function that has a registrar. It's a function with a registrar. There is a register that contains this particular information. And in terms of the people that were there to, what do you call this thing? The people that were responsible for the coordination of this fund and so on, there's a whole lot of lessons that they've already identified. Just to share with you one, and the figures of the numbers of people and so on who benefited, all of that is there, and the amounts and stuff like that. But just to share with you one example, we were using electronic transfer, cell phone based and stuff like that to be able to get the money to people. Some people would receive the message and they would actually ignore the message. Others would receive the message and they would delete the message. So these are what we are getting from the telco companies that were assisting us with these things. Only when we go back to them and say, did you receive something like this? And they say, yes, I did. Do you realize what it was? No, I don't know, and so on. So there are lessons there. I don't know what they are, but there are lessons there that we should be able to draw. How do we facilitate this? And we did it because we wanted to make sure that the process is swift. Others got their money like the following day immediately, and so others were kind of skeptical and didn't follow through, and we had to go back to them and so on. And as such, we had those. There are lessons of people that thought they were not on UIF, only to find that they were still on UIF and there were payments that were made quite recently, and that kicked them out because they were not freelancing. So these are the kinds of things that we learned. The lessons from the scheme itself, people that were not necessarily registered, for instance, with your CIPC and so on, but they are operating their businesses as sole proprietors and so on. How then do we make sure that those people are able to access these instruments as well? That wasn't there. So I'm saying there's a whole host of things that most of what is being said is things that we would not necessarily be able to go and use ourselves, because it's things that we all know, and in some instances, like I said, may not necessarily be adequately backed, and some of them may border on policy, but also some may border on actually taking a statement directly from a lobby group and insert it into something that is supposed to have a whole different type of credibility. So those are the kinds of things. Some of the things that are actually listed as recommendations are actually literally coming from the tourism recovery plan. So if we are reaffirming that the tourism recovery plan is what needs to be implemented, so be it, and then we say so. But it cannot look like it's something else when this thing is already a public knowledge. It's out there, and the activation, for instance, of domestic started way back in September when we had that grand opening, and it is actually building up. So these are some of the things that I would like to flag. I would like to see clear lessons. I would like to see that these lessons are drawn directly from whatever the literature that has been used, or whether you're going to interview people, I don't know. And then ultimately, if there are recommendations to be made, they've got to have a very direct link to what has actually been looked into there. The reskilling issue is already in the recovery plan, but there are other issues that are outside the portfolio of tourism. But we do believe that at least the things we have stated have been noted. Thank you.